So hi, Julia. Thank you for coming. Can you first tell us a bit about your background and what's led you to writing your new book?
Yes, hello. My name is Dr. Julia Christensen, and I am a neuroscientist and psychologist today. But I didn't start out to become that from the very beginning, let's say. So I went through a professional ballet dance education, and I was going to become a dancer. But a serious injury made that impossible, and I had to find something new to do with my life. And in that process, I had always had in my mind that I loved to understand more about human behavior. So why do we do the things we do, and why do we feel how we do? And as a dancer, I had a way of approaching it, but that I couldn't do anymore. And I heard about psychology, neuroscience, and how the brain actually is responsible for so much that we do, actually everything. And so I set out to study that. And I found some evidence that actually people were studying the art. Scientists, that you think with lab coats and, their magnifying glasses, they were studying the art, and in particular dance, with scientific methods. And they were finding stuff out about the brain by asking dancers to be part of their experiments. So this was all very exciting. And so I said, I want to be part of that. And that's how I first studied these exciting subjects. And then now I'm a scientist doing these studies myself.
Yes. So what is it about dance in particular that so excites neuroscientists?
Oh, dancing, and actually many forms of creative expression, is a type of skill that we learn, that we build habit loops about in our brain. So we get good at something by repeating these behaviors and by using them for something that we use expression. And for me, my dancing was always about technique and learning skills and so on, sure, but it was never everything. Actually, what these movements that I learned, the positions that I was able to strike, what they were about were a vocabulary that helped me to then express how I felt. And that sounds a bit strange, but actually now neuroscience can help me understand what that was and what happens actually when you learn a skill like a dance. It is a motor skill to start with, and our brain encodes that as a series of cues, an action that you perform, and then the reward, the learning signal that you have. So I can learn to do my arm like this. And then at some point, my brain realizes she's doing this quite often. So I'm going to want to be a bit more economic with my resources. So I'm going to encode this as a motor plan and put it from explicit effortful memory systems into implicit memory systems. And once it's in there, it's something that becomes a bit like our second nature, and we can use it for something else. It's like when you learn a new language, where you're actually first like thinking of every word, and then afterwards you start, asking for things. And then after a longer while, you make poetry in that new language. And it's the same with actually language. The expressivity through the arts and dance. So for me, dancing had always been a language, and now with this neuroscientific work that I was reading, I thought, oh, that makes all the sense of the world to me. And so dancing excites as a skill learning for scientists is interesting as this expressivity element that doesn't exist in sports, doesn't exist in actions that we do every day. It's a different type of us when we express what we feel.
Nice. So your book is called Pathway to Flow, and ballet is particularly is known as being an extremely, tough discipline. I think you touched on it there, but is there a sweet spot, what you're talking about when it comes to ease and challenge in order to achieve this state that you've dedicated your book to?
Yeah. So actually, my first book was called Dancing is the Best Medicine. And I was in a total conflict of conscience, because here I was with a broken spine advocating dance is the best medicine. And I still believe it is. But with the Pathway to Flow, my new book, I was now able to kind of tell the second part of the story. So now we get everybody to dance or to do any arts that worked for them. But then it's about how we use the behavior. And what we find, for example, in large population-based studies, you'd say, okay, when people dance or do music or do any creative activity, it's good for us, right? That's what the media tell us, do arts and you'll be fine. But the science actually shows that with higher levels of engagement, so if I do it competitively, if I do it, as a job, at very high levels, strangely, we see that people have bad health outcomes. And that can be due to two reasons. So one, anything competitive is related to stress response in the body. When we have that, cortisol, for example, is one of the agents in our body. Actually, our immune system deregulates. We have a lot of ill health issues that might come up. So that says competitive as a profession, dance, music, you name it, even in art, can be detrimental for our health because of these neurohormonal connections that exist inside us. And the second reason why we might find this is actually because the arts can help us. They can be a life coach, a life tool. So people who are already struggling might be taking up these creative activities. And that's what we see in the data. And that's why people with a lot of art engagement have less good health outcomes. And so in recent years, research by Professor Thankert from UCL, for example, is looking at, it's all about how we use these behaviors that make whether they are healthy for us or not, and in different life situations, how we should engage with them.
That makes sense. And what is flow as you describe it, and can it be seen, neurologically speaking? Can it be seen in the brain?
Yeah, that's two very interesting questions. One, so flow, the concept of flow was coined by the Hungarian scientist Mikhail Csikszentmihalyi, who dedicated his life basically to investigate the state. And he came up with these 8 principles that describe perfectly what it feels like to be in flow. So when you're in flow, you're completely absorbed. You have a clarity of what you want to achieve. So there are clear learning signals. You feel this transformation of time where time and space disappears, might slow down or speed up. You do what you do for intrinsic rewards. You're not striving towards something, you hover in that moment. And we can talk a bit more about how to make that happen in a moment. That's so interesting. So we do it for intrinsic rewards, and it feels so effortless. And there's this perfect balance between my skill and the challenge of what I'm doing. And you feel this sort of fusion of action and your awareness. You become the dance, the piece of music, the song. It's a very strange fusion of the self. You lose yourself in it, in a sense. And very importantly, you escape the unpredictability of life. So what unhinges our brain is the unpredictability of life, and that can come from many sources, from stuff that we choose to do, from stuff that happens to us. And flow, being in that state, gives us a cocoon of bliss for a moment to escape it, and that regulates loads of well-being processes in our brain. So that's the first thing, that Mikhail Csikszentmihalyi has defined these wonderful principles. When you read them, you just want the state even more. But like everybody probably knows, I know it. It's not like I can get it now I want. Well, today it actually is like that for me. And that's what I describe also in the book. I say you can create a creative habit which will help you tip off into flow when you need it, and regularly. But it's a practice that you need to create. I created mine with different art forms, and that's what we can maybe also talk a bit about. But what neuroscientists find is that it's extremely difficult to get people into that flow, for example, in a brain scanner, and then see what happens in the brain exactly. And if you just remember the list of things that I just named, they rely on so many processes in our brain. It's all encompassing. And that's probably also why the arts are such a astute tool to actually get there, because they unite a whole wealth of sub-behaviors and habits that you need to be doing when you are in an arts community, when you create, that you don't have to think about, doing all these things. that will then catapult you into flow. It will be cognitive overload if you tried. And so many systems in your brain would be kind of engaged, and especially your prefrontal systems, which are control networks. What we do know is to sort of tip off into flow, we actually want to let go a bit of these control networks. It's not that our brain is divided in controlled and uncontrolled networks. It's all connected, but it's particularly this connectedness between these more rule-based and these more technique-loving and these more sort of aware systems, and these more basic systems like the action, where also are encoded actually those actions that we have passed from the explicit into the implicit memory systems, so that we can tap into that skill that we have, a skill that we have to express, or that we have created with the technique learning that we've maybe been doing. So where in the brain is the flow state, there's not a single pathway, but you can forge your pathways in your brain in a way that you can get to flow. And that has a lot to do with cues in our surroundings and the actions that we choose to enact with them, and these little rewarding feelings that we have.
Nice, thank you. And I mean, what are the main obstacles then, as you see them in modern life, to achieving this kind of state?
Yeah, well, several things. I want to start out with saying, for most of us, one of the things that makes it difficult is that we sit too much. Average adult, there's data suggesting we are sitting up to 10 hours a day. This is a health hazard. According to WHO data, it's like one of the main problems that we have in our societies of today. We are people that sit too much, that don't have enough physical exercise. And when you speak to neurophysiologists, and they tell you about the memory systems and the prefrontal systems and all the sensory systems and the systems that are important for our feelings and the memory, you know, it's all connected, but it's especially connected with our movement systems. So our movement, the primary motor cortex is like an alley span sitting and sort of like over the head, but it's not just sitting there. It's connected with the rest of the systems of the brain. And what we often forget, in our brainstem and down into our spinal cord, run very long ganglia into our body. And the brain is not just hovering up there being marvelous. It is heavily connected with the rest of the body, our organs, our vestibular system. Everything is connected with actually our inner means. And by choosing what we expose ourselves to, for example, sitting, we enact a behavior which is not good for our body. And so it's not so surprising maybe that our brain has some inbuilt alarm bells for when we sit too long. It segregates cortisol, so again, stress hormones, into our blood. And as a result, so people who sit a lot or who are very sedentary have a higher risk to develop dementia in old age and cardiovascular diseases, and also for anxiety and depression. And if you think about it, if this is an alarm state for the body, it's not surprising. So for me, it's non-negotiable. We need 150 to 180 aerobic exercise per week. You can start with just 30 minutes, 5 days a week. It's a non-negotiable, and make sure to sleep enough and well. So these two things for our physical body. But there are other things that influence our physical body. And I speak especially about 3 mind hooks always, because these are behaviors that we enact, especially in our modern world. So it's competitiveness, it's seeking empty pleasures, and it is risk-taking behavior. Now, very important, I'm not saying we shouldn't do these things. We might need them in our work. We might need them in our daily life. We might have a high level of risk-seeking need. So I'm not here saying you should not do this. I'm just saying we can take the knowledge that is out there in cognitive neuroscience about what these behaviors do to our brain. And then for portions of our day, we sort of suck our soul into ourselves and get rid of these behaviors, because so they actually teach us an unrestful mind. There are a lot of detail, a lot of research that shows how this works and how the arts, when you practice them as non-competitive, not as your job, but even also artists who are professional artists can practice an artistic creativity practice outside of their work to have these good effects. Make sure to have these, of course. But these 3 mind hooks, they are really a problem for finding flow, and how to stay clear of them is, yeah, I think an important practice that we need to learn for ourselves.
I mean, how do we stay clear of those then? And why do so many people seem to find it difficult to do what's good for them?
Well, yes. So it's a little bit like, so we are, in a sense that we are in our life, we are what our habits have taught us to be. So the father of psychology, William James, he said, we're nothing but a heap of habits. And what does that mean? It means that we've learned the behaviors that we do so well that they've passed from this explicit memory systems into the implicit systems. And while this is a very good mechanism, it also is a mechanism that, for example, can make us a bit of a pleasure seeker. So, for example, habits are made, as we said, cue, action, reward. And if you just take this movement of looking at your phone, it's a movement of the eyes, of the hands. You see a cue, the notification icon, you click on it, that's the action. And the reward is that you get a message or something, information, we're scavenging for information. And you're starting to build the habit of, checking your phone very often. And it's something that is engaging very low level circuitries of our brain, parts of our brain that's actually there to keep us safe and make us efficient through our day. As I said, it's an energy saving mechanism, actually. So how do we actually go ahead and change this? So if we say that habits are all these little loops, our lifestyle is one big system of loops. I am the system of my habits. So what we can do is to try to attack that one little habit loop somewhere. I want to lose weight, so I need to go and, I don't know, run. Okay, that doesn't fit with all the other habit loops in my lifestyle. That's difficult. That makes it really hard. So what I propose is the system of an art. Superimpose it to you. And I'm saying that because I've experienced this happening quite a few times. So I grew up inside the art world. Everything in my day was habit loops around that practice of dance. My schooling, my eating, my when would I wash my clothes? How would I hang them? What clothes would I wear? When would I go to bed? Everything was not only about the dance, but also everything else was structured around it. You have this feeling of changing your lifestyle when you move to a new place, for example, and suddenly all the cues around you are new, and your brain needs to create new habits. It's easy to fall into old ones. So again, just moving to a new place might not do it. But it happened to me when I was in the dance world and then transitions into the science world, and there were new cues everywhere, and I didn't have actions for them, and I had to create something new, and I was missing flow, expressivity hugely, and then found all this evidence that we needed. I said, okay, what do I do? Well, after some years of lingering, of feeling really awful and not knowing how to control my thoughts, because we all have ruminative thoughts, but I wasn't used to this, I kind of superimposed again the arts onto me. In a sense, I actually started drawing, and that was an arts community with its small systems of habits around me that absorbed me. Later I could dance again, much less, obviously, better on a hobby level also. And I found Argentine tango with a huge social community with loads of different cues. It happens at night, so all my lifestyle changed into something that would make possible a life in science and dancing at night. So I really shifted all these little habit loops that made me into something different. And I'm saying that we can aim for that by attacking individual habits, but it just so happens that the arts unite so many aspects of what can help us create a new me, a new system of me, new habits, healthy habits. And I say that it's about 7 important behaviors that we enact naturally when we are in an arts habit. I call them a navigation aid, 7 stars you can collect. You don't have to think about it. That's a good thing, because they are contained in arts practices generally.
So that's what makes the arts a particularly useful tool, because it touches
Yeah.
on all of these different areas.
Yeah, it sort of unites them all. And I'm not saying that sports or yogic practices are not like that. I'm just saying there might be some more mind hooks to stay clear of. So, for example, sports are very often have this very competitive streak to them. So there's research showing that even in the spectators of football matches, be it an amicable match or a World Cup match, even the spectators have very high levels of cortisol in their blood. So stress response, and they would afterwards be more likely to have a deregulated immune system that will be making us more prone to maybe a cold or something. You know, I'm not saying we shouldn't have football. It's a great sport. It's just for fostering this healthy engagement with ourselves for some portions of the day, the arts might be a good choice just to have a look at. I could give you this navigation aid, a quick rundown of the 7 stars to look out for. Like,
Yeah, absolutely, go for it.
yeah. So the arts, the star 1 is a routine. Our brain hates predictability, loves predictability, and it so happens that giving it these experiences of routine can help foster that state of, okay, I can control something in my life. Maybe your life is completely uncontrollable. Happened to me in this terrible moment, but you can use the scales that you play on your instrument, the movements that you practice every day as a dancer. That can be just with the arms or the eyes, even just. You can, the drawing exercises. Big artists always have their technique routine in the morning, and that's star 2. Build technique and skill by repetitive action. Repetitive actions are washing machines for minds, and we can use them to create these skill that sort of get transitioned into the implicit memory systems and then become our second nature, to then express and use them for other parts of our artistic practice. And star 3 is about creating a social community. Our brain has systems that really needs the presence of other people to stay well balanced, let's say. Social isolation really wreaks havoc on our brain. That's probably an evolutionary explanation out there for that, that simply people who were able to live in groups had a better chance of surviving. So we have designated systems that, when I smile at you, your brain recognizes that this is a safe space, and via some nerve connections, this is transmitted to limbic system, insula, that's some homeostatic systems that sit sort of towards the center of our brain. Very important for, maintaining homeostasis and well-being, actually. So just being in a safe surroundings will give you that. So no competitiveness, no comparing yourself with others all the time. So a community that is welcoming will help you to have that star in your system. And star 4 is about, create aesthetic feelings. That's feelings that like awe or being moved, where after the experience you feel different. You might have that after a good movie, or after seeing a painting, you start cognitively restructuring things because of these very strong feelings that you've had. And this links very much to what I call the liking wanting principle. So for flow to happen, we should be in the moment. But how do I stay in this moment if this moment might be super boring? So it's about creating the cues in my surroundings of things that I like. Yeah. So when we are in a situation where we have created with colors, with smells, with actions that you do, with sounds, so that you like it. Maybe you're cooking and you like the colors and the shape of everything and the music, or an audiobook you create around you, so you like the moment. Then our brain is all endogenous opioids and endocannabinoids. When, however, we are striving, that's the wanting part of the principle. We're sort of, I want to lose weight, or I want to strike that pose, or I want to make this picture for Instagram or whatever. Then that's dopamine mediated striving, and that makes an unrestful mind. So trying to create, by knowing this liking wanting principle and how to make the liking part stand out for some times of the day, that might help us to get these transformative feelings to us as we create or as we consume the arts of others in a museum, in a cinema, in a concert. So many tools out there for us. In star 5, it's so important to use our imagination. It happens naturally when we, for example, when I sit and draw, I might just be drawing the leg of a dancer or the neckline or something, but I have it in my mind, and it sort of is guiding my brain and my hand. So we underestimate the power of the imagination to optimize our movement and to add value to our brain. And it has this ability to just connect. I can say, sit up straight. People will do this and maybe make a very unergonomic movement. If I say, imagine I'm pulling you up by the hair, and suddenly, crack, 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 and everything aligns, and you look much different, and you also smile. Or I say, put your arms up like, like this, and you're sort of looking, and then you're doing this, and I say, no, hug a tree. Everybody hugs the tree, and it's a perfect movement. So there are many ways of using the imagination. Sports people call it mental training. In arts, I call it the imagination. But it is a thing, because our brain has something unique in the animal kingdom, which is this ability to plan ahead with the imagination of my movements. So imagination is star 5. Star 6 is movement and expression. We've spoken about this. We need this in our life. And star 7 is, not being fixated, but to cultivate purpose and intention. And how do I do that? Everybody wants purpose in their life and feeling meaning in their life. If we chase after this wanting principle, all these dopaminergic actions, achieve things, this will make us achieve things, which is great. But if we can hover and create in the moment, for some reason, people who do that often have this feeling of purpose and meaning in their life. So, for example, there have been huge studies on people who knit and do crochet a lot. And it's just, you create little beautiful, or maybe less beautiful, but you create with your hands, and this movement on repeat that makes things happen physically in front of you. It seems to be an incredibly good mind medicine for some people. So it's about finding the art that you can use to create something. When I create a dance, it's gone in the very moment that I've danced it, of course, but I have the memory of it. And while I dance, I have these feelings that I connected maybe with another human being, that we connected with the music. And for some reason, our brain makes pathways between very low level parts of the brain that are responsible for feeling satisfaction and reward and all that. And those parts of the brain important for our sense of self and sense of accomplishment. And like slowly, we build a sense of self that is strong and that has good beliefs about itself, that I can do something, even if it is, for a start, just a crochet line. But that is really a lot, because it's not easy to learn, and it's something that can give you a fulfillment in the moment. So these 7 stars, I call them stars because I want this to be fun, and I am a bit like that. I use imagery a lot, and I invite people to do the same, be a bit different, just try out new things. And if this was a dance class, I could say, move your foot more like that, then you have a better movement. Or take care of your shoulders and maybe try, snapping your head around, you'll do a better pirouette. With our brain, I can't tell you, please activate your insula more and you shall feel more better. This is impossible. Our brain works through the behaviors that we choose to enact. And in my book, I speak about the body orchestra, this idea that inside us all the time stuff is happening. Our brain tells our body what it wants and what it needs right now, because of what we expose the body and our senses to. And by making sure that, this is in a good space and the actions that we're enacting are, for example, creative, we are activating the body orchestra. We're directing our body orchestra in ways that are conducive to well-being and feeling good. So, create how you feel by what you do, literally do with your body. It really is a thing. And developing that awareness and taking that into your day, I think that was really important for me. And then another very important thing that I learned from trauma psychologist was that our brain becomes good at what we use it for. So if we use it for rumination, that is also a behavior, and that when we practice it, we get better at it, unfortunately. So let's, learn to do things that are maybe happy making, or in some way connecting with other people. It is not easy, and I want to be sure to say that the arts are a tool that we can use in our everyday. If you suspect that you might be suffering from a mental health condition, you do need to have a professional help to accompany you, but the arts can go with you. So that can never be the only answer. But because of the multifacetedness of the arts and creative behaviors, I think everyone should have a creative behavior with them in their backpack always. I have my drawing pouch here. It's just a very simple box, and in there I have my drawing stuff, and it has its looks and it smells its own way, and I can just have it with me with some paper, don't need any special paper. And it can be something very simple, but it can always travel with you and sort of bring you back to this feeling of creating and away from bad behaviors that we might be enacting without being aware. So this is not a reproach. It happens to everyone, but I think it's a good thing to say you can take back control and learn more about how to choose how you feel by what you do.
Absolutely. Just a question came up as you were speaking. I mean, how much does a flow state relate to just being a resting state for the brain, and how much is it to do with just a sense of safety?
So about in the beginning of the 2000s, a very exciting finding came up, and that was this about the resting state, the default mode network, as it came to be called, a network that seems activated when the research participants that were being studied were not doing anything at all. So normally you put a research participant into a fMRI machine, for example, you want to see what their brain is doing when they solve a task. So these researchers, however, they did something quite funny. They looked at the participants' activity, brain's activity, when they were not doing anything at all. So just thinking about what am I doing next, and maybe mind wandering, thinking about past and future themselves. And then this special network was active. And it seems active reliably also when we contemplate the arts. So this traveling back and forth, linking what I see, those cues that enter my senses with me, my memories, with my life plans maybe. And it's what we do know also is that people who suffer from mental health conditions, the default mode network is abnormal, so it doesn't function in the same way. And we think what we're seeing is that this might be linked to the important function that this state might have. We're still in the process of finding out more about this, but it might be linked to restoration and restorative processes in brain and body. And so this mind wandering, it might actually be something that is incredibly important and not necessarily the cue of a lazy mind, but much rather actually something we should be doing sometimes, and going to a museum, or maybe watching a movie, or listening to some music or an audiobook. It might be actually what helps us activate the state regularly. And knowing that it's abnormally activated in mental health conditions, it's basically a cue for all of us. Hey, we should foster it healthily. But as I was saying before, it's very difficult to tell your brain to activate something in particular. You have to do that through your behaviors that you choose to enact. And for example, one thing that I say is put boundaries for your senses, quite literally. Sometimes there are some specific behaviors, cues, the news, other people, your work. There are cues that have a particular harsh effect on our brain when it enters, because cues that enter our brain, they are being processed by low-level systems that if they deem them for important enough, we'll send them on for processing, and our brain and body will react, even if we're not completely aware of it, but it's a preparatory response. And that is not conducive to flow or to activating default mode network. So we can know that what we should do via our behavior, but we can't really say, brain, please now, default mode network. That won't work. And then what we do have to do also is to hope that a lot of researchers who have this research field as their specialty will make sure to replicate and expand this research so we can know more exactly about why we have it, what it's for, and what we can do to activate it. Though the arts seem to be a quite good bet for it.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much, Julia. I think you have a copy of your book to show us.
Oh, I do, yes. Beautifully designed by the Square Peck team at Vintage. I love it so much myself.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure speaking to you.
Well, it's been a pleasure to listen to your very cool questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.